Are you a woman of culture in a leadership role, striving to lead authentically? Or are you a leader of women of culture and hoping to enable them to succeed? Then you'll want to tune into this episode where executive coach Kanchan Prinsloo shares her insights and practical tips to help you. Let's dive in. Welcome back to another episode of The Leader Within. Today, I'm excited to introduce Kanchan Prinsloo. She's an executive coach and CEO of Capri Consulting. Kanchan is passionate about helping women of color. Sorry, I'm just going to pause there. For editing purposes, I'm going to restart. Kanchan is passionate about helping women of culture and leading leaders of women of culture to find strength and alignment between women of culture's heritage and traditions and their organizations through speaking, executive coaching, and group training services. With her extensive leadership and consulting experience, I'm excited to have her share her insights with you. Well, welcome, Kanchan. Can you tell us a little bit about how you discovered your passion or your niche?
Thank you, Angela. My passion and niche, truth be told, as my mother tells me, has been going on since I was quite young, talking and speaking to what it means to be a woman. I came from a traditional Indian family. I was born in India. And so I have two older brothers. I remember vividly being in a position where I would see, well, that's so unfair. They're outside doing this and I have to be inside. And part of that is, as I grew up in Canada, I came to Canada at the age of 3. So I could see sort of what was a cultural way of being as a woman, as a girl, to what I was seeing was possible sort of from a location perspective. So as my mom says, it has been deep within me for a long time. And my first career of 26 years in healthcare, I knew that for me to have impact in the world, in what I did, I needed to be outside of systems. I couldn't be within a system. At that point, it really started to become more and more clear when I did my executive coaching. Actually, when I did my master's in leadership, I was already very aware of what I knew leadership. It put language to what I already sort of innately knew I wanted leadership to be and was. Following that, it was definitely executive coaching and being very clear it was with women. It was actually with, and this is kind of a negative term, but I'm going to use it. It was with marginalized leaders. For me, it was the intersectionality of both gender and race. It was women, it was culturally diverse women, to be very niched. And I knew that because I am that. And we always need to teach what we need to learn what we teach. So there was a circle, a very beautiful circle of all the work that I have been doing within myself and working with a lot of executive leaders and sort of doing that ebb and flow. So that's a long-winded answer to tell you where and how I got here.
Well, I appreciate you sharing your story and how clearly you've leveraged your lived experience to really empower those who are in the niche that you're ultimately looking to help. And as you navigated your career, like what are some attributes of leaders or mentors who've played a key role in your success? Whether their attributes made you think, hey, I kind of want to adopt some of these traits, or maybe you're just like, I would never, ever do that to another person.
Fantastic. And there is a mix of both. After 26 years, there's a mix of both. And I'm sure I'm a mix of both to somebody else. Let me lean in on sort of the best leader I had was the last one that I left in when I was working in healthcare. And the qualities this leader had is she was kind. She put front and center what she knew to be intuitively correct for the circumstances versus conforming to a structure, sort of going, no, this is what's needed to happen because, as we all unpack, whatever the circumstances were. And so I saw bravery. I saw a sense of ability and confidence. So she's a highly competent leader, years of experience, plus she continued to show up in a space of being very aligned with what she knew her leadership was. Let me give a quick example of what she did, which really I had not seen before. I have done thousands of interviews as a leader, whether you're interviewing people. And I remember being part of a panel interview with her, and she came in and we were there and we were talking, and she came in and she offered a glass of water. She said, "Here are the questions I'm going to ask you. I want you to be comfortable so you can bring your best self." I mean, I've done versions of it, but not sort of in that really generous way to make sure that this person was going to be able to be the best. It wasn't a let me see how you can do, and sometimes interviews can be. That's a simple example, but it was that sort of way of being, that kindness, that generosity, that acknowledging the person for who they are, that I found to be very, very powerful.
Love that, because I think there are generally two approaches that hiring managers take when it comes to interviewing. It's either they try to catch you off guard to see how you, I guess, act in that moment, and respond to surprises, right? Because they can pop up in workplaces. And then those who are like, yeah, you know what? Like, let's just treat it as a conversation, because I think through that natural conversation where you're comfortable, I think it kind of shows a little bit more than maybe you otherwise would have been able to see as an interviewer, right? So, and I guess my other question to you is, because you've had a lot of leadership experience and you coach leaders, what would you say is one of the most difficult challenges that you've encountered when it comes to developing other leaders to kind of be able to fully lead and really have kindness and treat others well and not completely burn out because they have way too much on their plate, right? Like, what
Yeah.
has set you up for success in that sense?
So I have been an executive coach for 11 years. I would say the biggest thing that I have seen leaders, or a challenge that leaders have, is actually internal. It's actually their own mindset, the what they see as possible for themselves or within circumstances. And just to use that other example, the one that we just talked about, if we go in wanting to help a leader be the best that they can, versus how do I put them under pressure to see how they show up, there's just a mindset in terms of I am going to help create an environment that helps sort of up level leaders because that is possible versus, okay, well, it's really hard in this space and we need to, and there's a more aggressive sort of approach to how the world is. I'm not saying that that's, through rose colored glasses. I'm not saying the world is fantastic. At the same token, our mindset as a leader, how we view a circumstance, is within our control. And it's that sort of peeling back. And as humans, we all have our own experiences that get us to where we are. And sometimes it is that drive and that perseverance that allows us to do that. It's what's the story we're telling ourselves in that drive and perseverance that's going to make a difference. So as an executive coach, I mean, I'm working with very senior leaders. They've achieved a lot. They've got a high level of experience, abilities that brings them into that position. The piece that I get to play with at that point is, one, I get to be a thought partner with them. The other is, what else is happening within that's sort of holding you back from doing that next piece, that next whatever that is. And that next piece may be having the courage to exit, to go, oh, really, this is what I wanted to do. Or it may be to do something within an organization that is unheard of or not even fathomable at that moment. So that to me is the mindset is sort of the key piece for that.
I appreciate you sharing that. And speaking of the mindset piece, how does that play a role in the work that you do in empowering leaders who lead women of culture?
Fantastic question, because leaders that lead women of culture, there is a certain amount, most of the leaders that I get to work with have a deep desire to do better, meaning aware that they're not aware of everything that's going on and not sure what to do with it. So one of the things that I help leaders do is really get clear on what is curiosity. Like, really lean hard on the that I don't understand. Because when you're at a senior position like that, most likely you're the last person to give an answer to something. You would see, most likely that's what it is. So you are used to a pattern of knowing, a pattern of being decisive, a pattern of creating vision. So there is a shift that's expected at that moment of curiosity to go, I don't know. Tell me in your experience what's happening. As an example, there's that. The other thing that is important for leaders, and it's so important, it's deep empathy. So when I say that, a lot of people are like, oh yes, yes, of course, I need to have empathy for the people. And I say, actually, it's not for others. It's for you. You are on a journey when it comes down to going into an unknown space, stories from women of culture that you may not know, patterns, skills, learning that you may not know, and having empathy for yourself to trip up, to maybe say the wrong thing, to get back up again and kind of go, yeah, I'm on a learning path here. That empathy is for you. And I think that's a really, really important space to come from. And lastly, I say the word courage because it does take courage and energy to stand back up again. And at times, courage to say things in a space that maybe things have not been said. If I'm a leader to women of culture and I all of a sudden learn something, to be courageous to share that, to be, and again, possibly in an environment that it's not necessarily going to be well received, or there is already preconceived ideas about what it is you're going to talk about. That takes courage. So those three skills I think are really important when I work with leaders to women of culture, that are important as a self mindset, a self way of being is necessary to ensure that we are having and creating a thriving relationship with women of culture.
You touched on something there that kind of had made me have a light bulb moment because you talked a lot about mindset and just that extreme accountability inwards, and I never thought of it from that perspective. I was like, that's genius, right? And I guess when it comes to leading as well, one of the things that I read recently is like as you go higher, sometimes the decisions that you make is it feels kind of disconnected to essentially what would practically make sense for the bottom line, right? And part of why that happens is because as things get filtered upwards, because people just want to make sure that their leaders look good, they look good, right? And then once it hits the executive, sometimes when they make decisions, it's kind of disconnected. So, how does what you do create an environment where there is more connection between the theory of how this decision technically should make sense versus how it should practically be applied?
So there's a difference in how again, I'm going to use the word mindset, but there's a difference in how we relate to the work we're doing. I agree with you that there are times where when we look at, we want to make sure our leader looks good. We're here to support. We as well want to, I agree with that whole way of being because there is some truth to that. But with everything, it's not an on-off switch. There's a dimmer switch that we need to be able to navigate and be able to go up and down in. Part of that is yeah, I mean, we are leaders in every level, wherever you are. There's a certain amount of discernment that we all hold. We know what is right from wrong. We know where we want to go. So that's how do we stay on the dimmer switch with that? We share what part of it is that we share. You share your stories, you share your knowledge, you share your wisdom, you share your conviction, you share your beliefs. What happens in organizations, from what I have seen in my experience, is that we are following a ideal and doing everything we can to follow the ideal. The way an organization is able to breathe is to make sure that every leader is sharing their own convictions, their beliefs about X, and then at the same token, be unattached to the share. Whew, that's a hard piece to do. A lot of leaders that I work with, who we are and how we are. I have been this actually, forget leaders. I have been this where my role is my life, meaning it defines, it gives me the title I want to have. Sorry, let me be clear. It's not that it's my life. It has defined who I am. I am X, person X in this position. And when that is removed, then at that point, it becomes a little bit of a whole other existential journey. The point being, though, when we are attached to our title, things become personal. And when things become personal, it becomes distorted. So when we're looking at an organization, having a fluidity within it of ideas, each leader needs to show up with a clear sense of your own sense of discernment of an opinion, sharing that, and then doing everything you can to unattach yourself from the results of what you've shared. That to me makes a big key difference within an organization.
And speaking of unattaching yourself from the results, because like you said, it's really difficult, right? And especially for new leaders, right? Because it almost feels like this pressure of like, I need to perform because like I'm brand new, the stakes are pretty high. Like, are there any practical tools or internal monologues or like, hey, like do this to help you better manage not attaching yourself to the results, right? So you can truly serve your people and make great decisions. Right?
So one of the things as new leaders that I believe is a reminder, a tool that we have to do is ask questions, continue to ask questions. A lot of times what I see is that we have a role, we won't ask a question because we don't want to look incompetent or we don't look like we are able to achieve what someone has asked us to do. And the questions the questions are all about clarity. Getting clarifying questions in place is absolutely helpful in us going in as a new leader and being able to come up with our opinion, our thought about what's happening. And then when we are there, that communication about asking questions helps us build the relational capacity to turn around and know where we fit in this team, where we are in this team, which again depersonalizes, gives a greater chance to depersonalize yourself from a response that you may have given.
Love that. And as I think about how you see yourself fitting in, what does that look like for a woman of culture? Because I know you help leaders who lead women of culture, but then you also help women of culture who are aspiring leaders and trying to navigate like their career. Right? What is maybe one common challenge you've seen, and how have you kind of helped them overcome that through the work that you do?
So one that comes up for me is women of culture, beyond having the lowest representation in senior positions. I mean, when you look at the McKinsey Lean-In reports, they give you the statistics of 5% versus, it is the lowest representation. So I get to work with executive women. And what's really powerful about these executive women is, again, the competence is there in spades. Part of the lack of visibility is compensated with a tremendous amount of prep, knowledge, experience. They'll walk into a room and most likely not only have their own material prepped, but probably know what everyone around the table needs to know as well. Again, over prepping. So what I get them to do is do something that is the exact opposite to what they feel is they can do, which is play. How do we take ourselves lightly? Things are serious. I mean, when we're at work, we're at this table, I have responsibility, I have this, I have to prep, I have to show up. How do we take ourselves lightly? What is it that we can do to bring, because when you talk to these women, when I speak to these women, executive women, their home life is so different from their work life. And I always ask, would people at work even believe that you do X, Y, and Z, what you've done at home? Oh gosh, no. And so we talk. If there is a yes, it's usually in a very few sort of top 3 people that they are very close with that know a little bit more about who they are. So the biggest thing that I can help when I'm working with leaders is to help them take themselves lightly. What is it that you are doing that, and I'll give you an example. How do you share even a little bit of what goes on in your personal life? It could be a show that you're seeing, and that's an easy way to do it. And what do you do in terms of getting yourself the lightness that you need in both places? Actively, engaging in. I'm someone who spends a fair bit of time around. I love comedy. I love going to comedic shows. I love watching comedy. It's the thing that feeds me. So I will bring that into a lot of what I'm when I'm having conversations, even in my coaching, even if I'm facilitating a program, I'll bring something in that I think is quite funny. Again, I'm being mindful. This is my funny. May not be everyone's funny, but it's my funny. And it's usually a spoof on either myself or others that is very common and lighthearted. It's not to be punitive in any way. But that's a way that I do it in terms of bringing in lightness. And again, I can't underestimate, this was a learned piece for me. That was something I had to absolutely practice myself, that how much of myself do I share? I never did that for quite a few years in my work. I was separated for a year before anyone in my work knew about it. That is crazy when I think about it now. And I just didn't feel why would I bring that in? That's my home life. This is my work life. So I had already delineated the two. So trying to bring a bit more of that dimmer switch, bringing a little bit in and moving the switch instead of having it off or on or having it binary is really important.
I love that visual of a dimmer switch, right? Because even thinking of some of the things that you mentioned about that lightness or that relatability piece, right? Like I definitely noticed that executive presence is so different than someone who you get in the elevator with and you're like, it's almost like a cold feeling. And when I think
Absolutely.
about feedback and I think about how do then your employees share a little bit about them so then you can better understand their decision making process and then equip them better. The way that you described how you empower leaders makes a significant difference. So as we slowly wrap up our conversation, what would you say is the first thing that comes to mind for the following? What does it take to unleash the potential of individuals and organizations?
To believe that that is possible. There's a lot of conversation around we want to unleash, we want to believe that it is possible and knowing that it's not going to be in the traditional way. One of the things as women of culture, we do not have a traditional path to. I remember working with a woman of culture who had a very high pitched voice when she turned around and was talking quickly. What she needed was a voice coach, not an executive coach. So knowing that it's possible to unleash the potential in this woman as an example, and that way of doing it may be different than the traditional way of having it done within an organization. So knowing it's possible and keeping yourself open to knowing that there is other ways that may be showing up as to how to do that.
I appreciate that. And my last question to you is what is one thing that you're working on that you are excited about?
Oh, I love that question. So one of the things that I am working on is I am working with the Claremont Graduate University and working with a PhD student, and we're bringing forward women of culture, a white paper and a research that goes in, because there is nothing around this. I mean, it's a word that I've coined. Women of culture are women that are outside of the dominant culture. So in Canada, the dominant culture is white male Christian. And so women of culture are outside of that. So really getting a tight definition, working with my colleague at Claremont University is exciting. And I am excited to bring that into the world in a different way.
Well, I can't wait to see the outcome of that on LinkedIn. I know you're very active there, and anyone who wants to follow your work is able to kind of see that there too. So thank you again, Kanchan, for taking the time to share your insights and your story. And
Thank
to
you.
everyone else who's tuned into another episode, thank you for your time and attention. It means more to me than you'll know. And I can't wait to stay in touch with you on my next episode. Till then, stay safe.